Hey, I'm Angela Walters from Quilting is My Therapy, and in this video I'm going to show you how easy it is to tackle a big quilt on a small sewing machine using the Quilt As You Go technique. Quilt As You Go allows you to take that quilt top and divide it into sections, quilt them, and then put them together. That means you don't have one large quilt to cram into your sewing machine. I'm going to show you how to do this technique using the Build a Quilt quilt that was part of our Block of the Month program this year. But it could work for any quilts that you're working on. First, look at your quilt pattern and decide how you're going to break it up into sections. You could go block by block or even row by row. The less sections you have means the bigger they'll be, but the less joining you'll have to do at the end. I'm going to go ahead and tackle it block by block since I'm going to show exactly how I quilted each block. Once I know how big the sections are going to be, I'm going to go ahead and cut my backing and batting pieces. First, cut the batting to the finished size of your block. So this block is 24.5 inches, but it's 24 inches finished, and that's what size I'm going to cut the batting. Now the backing piece, I'm actually going to do it a little different and cut it much larger than the quilt block. I like to have something to hang on to when I'm quilting along the edges. I'll come back later and trim it up. I'm going to layer those three pieces together, starting with the backing, the batting, and then the quilt block, and base them together. You could use spray, you could use fusible batting, or even pins. Then comes the best part, it's time to quilt. The one thing to remember though is I don't want to quilt all the way to the edge of the block. I'm going to leave about 1/4 to 1/2 of an inch space unquilted because that's where I'm going to join the blocks together. And this block is just begging for some echoing to highlight the center from the outside as well as to make the different shapes really pop out. Instead of echoing all the sides of the block, I'm actually just going to echo the outsides of all the background pieces, and that's going to help frame that whole center element. Then I'm going to stitch along the seam to get back where I started and fill in that background area with my filler. The filler is really any design that's going to fill in that space and get me to the next portion of my block. Once the section's filled in, I'm going to repeat that, echoing and filling in the spaces. I love angling the wishbone towards the center of the block, so in the corners I'll quilt them diagonally, and on the sides I'll quilt them horizontal or vertically. What can I say? It's the little things that amuse me. Even though the echoing takes just a little bit more time, I think the effort is well worth the result. But you could leave this step out and just quilt the wishbones or any filler in that background. And here you can start to see the echoing and the filler really starting to add some texture. Now let's work on the star in the center of the block. I think for the cross in the center, I'm going to do a little continuous curve. Continuous curve is great because it works in blocks of all different sizes and shapes. Once I hit the corner of the block, I'm going to quilt a continuous curve variation in which I quilt a leaf-like shape that extends to both points of that corner. Since the fabric is so busy, you're not really going to see the quilting anyway, so I'm trying to keep it nice and simple so I can get this block done as quickly as possible. I just love how the continuous curve is getting me from corner to corner and really helping me quilt this block as efficiently as possible. Well, now that I have an idea what I'm going to do in the center, I'm going to go ahead and finish this up so that I can work on the outer part of my block. In the outer portion of my block, I'm still going to keep with that continuous curve design. I'm just going to quilt it slightly different. Quilting this variation allows me to start at one corner and end at the opposite corner. That's really going to help me maneuver my way around the block. For the background filler, I'm going to use the swirl hook. I love how the points of that swirl really fit into those corners, especially within these triangular shaped blocks. Now, if you're struggling with quilting the swirl hook design, don't worry. I have a video tutorial that will show you exactly how to do it. You can find the link to that and other tutorials in the description box below. And don't forget, you don't want to quilt all the way to the edge of the block. Leave yourself about 1/4 to 1/2 of an inch. You're going to need that extra space here in a little bit when we join our blocks together. So I'm thinking a little swirl hook, some echoing and continuous curve, and I think this block's going to look awesome. Well, I'm going to keep quilting it, and then we'll see how to join them together using the Quilt As You Go technique. Now that I've finished quilting the block, I'm going to trim the backing fabric so that it's the same size as the quilt block, being extra careful not to accidentally cut into the quilt block itself. It just so happens that I have 2 of these quilt blocks finished, so now it's time to show you how to put them together. Now don't worry, I'm going to show you how I quilted the blocks in other videos. Right now we're just learning how to do the technique. Before I actually sew the blocks together, I'm going to carefully fold back the backing piece and pin it down. I just don't want it getting in my way when it's time to actually start sewing. Once the backing is out of the way, I'm going to flip it over and put it right sides together with my other quilted piece. Lining up the raw edge of the tops, then I'm going to use a clip to hold it in place, being careful not to catch the backing or the batting into the seam. I like to use these little clips because they hold the fabric together, but they stay out of the way. Then I'm going to take it to the machine and carefully, oh so carefully, sew just those two pieces together. Since there's a lot going on right here, I'm going to use my walking foot to help evenly feed the layers through the machine. I'm going to take my time ensuring that it's as straight as possible and that those backing fabrics have been folded out of the way and they're not getting stuck in the seam. And if this seems like too much of a pain, just remember how much easier this is than actually machine quilting a large quilt through your sewing machine. And let's see what we have. So now we can see we have the first part of our blocks sewn together. I love my quilts quilted to death, so after I'm done with the whole quilt, I'm probably going to come in and fill in a little bit of this area that's unquilted. I still have to finish the back edge though. I can't leave the quilt like this. First, I'm going to press it all to one side, starting with that inner seam and then the backing fabric. Then I'm going to close up the seam to give it a nice finished look. There's a couple of different ways I could go about doing this, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to just fold over the other side and give it a nice finished edge like this. And I'm going to press it right in place. And that's going to give my fold a nice crisp edge so that I can come back and hand stitch that in place. If you're not a fan of hand stitching, you could just sew that down and just have an extra line on the front. But I've got the perfect Netflix movie picked out, so I'm going to hand stitch this while I'm watching TV. Once I'm done stitching along that seam, I'll have my first two blocks joined together. And I'm going to keep doing that, joining the blocks together in rows, and then do the same exact thing to join the rows together to make the whole quilt. So the next time you're looking at a quilt pattern and you're a little intimidated about quilting it, remember that you can use the Quilt As You Go technique to break it up and make it easier to manage. Well, thanks so much for watching. If you've liked this video or tried the technique, leave me a thumbs up or leave a comment below. I love to see your questions and try to answer them as much as I can. Happy quilting!